All right, again, just a kind of very, very super quick review. We're starting this week with our terrestrial biomes. And terrestrial means, Marley, having to do with land. So any of our land biomes are terrestrial biomes. And we started off looking at the grasslands, right? Whoa, where did my screen go? Hopefully it's still recording. Doesn't look like it is, but we'll see how this works out. I don't know why that went away. We're talking about the grasslands. And it's important to understand all the things about the grasslands, and I'm not going to sit here and review everything about the grasslands because that'll be the third day in a row we've covered that. And today you're going to be doing comparing and contrasting of the grasslands and some other places in Seesaw. And I am going to have to keep clicking at it, looks like. I don't know why, but we'll figure that out. Not watching that today. Skipping all that. And this is where we were yesterday, right? The Savanna. And we said in the Savanna, it is a grassland. We kind of have two grasslands, the prairies of North America and then savannas. And you can find these grasslands in Africa, and it covers most of Africa, right? Grasslands are most of Africa. And we talked a lot about the biotic and the abiotic factors. We said that in the Savanna, you have a dry season and a wet season. We said in the Savanna that, again, grasses are the main plant life, although we did talk about that crazy acacia tree, right, with the giant thorns that giraffes are able to eat off of. We watched that video. We said that it's very hot there because it's very close to the equator. We passed the globes around the classroom. We looked at it. We saw where Africa was, and we realized the equator runs right through the middle. So it's going to be warm like Florida all year long in most parts of Africa, and even hotter than that in some others, even desert-like in some because of it's right on the equator. And that's important to know. That again, we said it's the animal life. When you get a question and the question says which of the following are most likely animals of a grassland or a savanna or a prairie, you need to be able to differentiate between those. It's not sharks and jellyfish and seahorses. Those are in the ocean. It's not bears and deer and squirrels. Those are in the deciduous forest. It's not going to be wolves and caribou. Those are going to be in the taiga. It's not the polar bears and penguins and seals. Those are in the tundra. You have to know the basics of the animals in the different places. And I think we've watched enough TV since we were little, Crap Brothers and those kind of things, since we were tiny. You know enough about the animals in the different places that they are that we don't have to spend a lot of time on that. We talked about camouflage, and we said that this deer, he was camouflaged, not anymore in this picture, but we also noticed that the lion is also camouflaged. So it's almost like you have to overcome looking out for other things that are camouflaged too, which can be pretty tough. And we're going to skip over those. And now we are going to talk about the tundra. We know from the misspelled things on the vocabulary, and it says it should say a treeless area, but it says a treeless R. We'll fix that somehow. But it's a treeless area. It's freezing cold there. It covers about 1/5 of the land on Earth, and that's pretty huge, right? I mean, if you were to take the Earth and divide it into 5 parts, and 1/5 of that is the tundra, and you know that 75% of the Earth is water, okay, time out. The tundra covers a lot of area, right? It does cover a lot of area. The word tundra comes from a Finnish word. I'm usually up here talking about Greek and Latin words, but it's a Finnish word that means treeless plain. I don't think we have anybody here that speaks Finnish, right? I have some Spanish speakers. I've got some people that understand that. And some people that are starting to get the Greek and Latin prefixes and suffixes, but not a lot of Finnish. But it means treeless plain, and that is a great description, a perfect description of this biome. It's located in the Arctic, which is a circle that surrounds the North Pole. But this is not the only place we can find freezing cold temperatures and few animals. In Antarctica and other cold environments, there are areas that can be described as part of a tundra as well. As we've done with everything else, right? And I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to start a new page, and I'll write our target station in just a second. I'm going to write this in blue because it kind of reminds me of being cold, right? Sort of. And if I start talking about the abiotic factors of the tundra, one of the very first abiotic factors that comes to my mind is climate or temperature, which is what we tested out in some places. And I can go ahead and let you know, the plant that we tried to grow in the freezer, it didn't grow. Even though it was in the dark and those other plants grew in the dark, the soil was frozen. And that happens, and you know that because that's part of the definition of tundra. But it is really, really cold. The crazy thing is, when I start thinking about the tundra and I moved from climate to water, when I'm actually kind of looking at rainfall, this is one of the driest biomes there are. It's next to the desert in terms of dryness. There's not a lot of precipitation that falls in the tundra. And when it does fall, it falls as snow. It rains less than 10 inches a year. That's not a lot. I feel like at some points we've gotten that, maybe even last year, over like a 2 or 3 week period. And that's why we were out of school when those hurricanes came through, because it flooded other schools. That's why we were out. Remember we were out last year a lot when the hurricanes came through? Our power was on in most places. There were schools that you could not go in the cafeteria. It was like knee-deep water. Yes. Knee-deep water. And you can't go to school in that. We can't ride floats. That's not how it works. It'd be fun to be on a lazy river and like you get in the float and it takes you to the lunchroom and you go through the lunchroom on a float and you get your food and you float back to class. That'd be funny. It's like going to school at Great Wolf Lodge, but that's not how it works. The thing that I need you to understand is summer, the temperatures rarely get above 50. Like that's when the people in the tundra are outside in shorts and short sleeves. It's hot out here. It's 50 degrees. When most of you would be putting on a jacket thinking, wait a minute, 50 is a little cool. It can reach negative 50 degrees. Now, boys and girls, negative 50 is a little cold, even for me. I wear shorts all winter long. I even wear them when we're playing in the snow. Negative 50, I'm going to have to put on some pants and some long underwear because that's a little cold for me. But it freezes the ground, and that's where we get that term permafrost. It is permanently frozen, permafrost. And that's about 6 inches below the ground, frozen most of the year. The top layer thaws, but the bottom layer of the things pretty much stays frozen all year, which keeps moisture from sinking, and it keeps it kind of on top of the ground. It keeps some of the ground a little bit soggy. So we've mentioned that the abiotic factors, the important things in the tundra, we have the fact that the climate is very cold, the sunlight is not very intense, the water, there's very little precipitation, less than 10 inches a year, and the soil is not very good. There's not a lot of trees there. It's called the treeless area for a reason. And we have permafrost, about 6 inches down or so. It's permanently frozen for the most part. The tundra plants, there is very low diversity. There's that word again, diversity. What does that mean when I say diversity, Drew? Do what? Sort of that, but what's another way to talk about that? Not living things. Diversity means like many different types of things. There aren't many different types of organisms that live here. Mainly because of the fact that it's cold and there's not a lot of sunlight and there's not a lot of water and the soil's frozen, like all those negative things. Some have learned to adapt. There's that vocabulary word again about adaptations, changing yourself so that you can fit into your environment. They've adapted to the cold and the low rain amounts. Lichen, you've seen that stuff growing on rocks and trees before. Moss, small shrubs flourish in this tundra. The plants that live in harsh permafrost soil have to adapt to the weather by being short. They group together to resist those winds that we talked about. The growing season in the tundra is short. We saw how fast plants can grow, but when it is at 50 degrees and there's like some bare like patches of ground around, the plants grow kind of fast. Tundra plants get their energy from the sun through photosynthesis just like every other plant, but they've also adapted to the low light intensity. They've adapted to the sun not being as intense. Compared to the other plants and other biomes, they use not a lot of energy. They take in just enough to kind of survive and they move on. Plant adaptations. Animal adaptations. Easily Grant's favorite animal, I think. Animals that live here are tough. They have learned to adapt to the cold, the low rain amounts, and some animals in the tundra are adapted to the climate by breeding and raising their young in the summer. Right? You don't want to have babies when it's negative 50, right? It'd be a baby sickle. It would not be cool. It wouldn't move like those baby tigers all over the place. It'd be frozen in one spot, but that would not be a good thing, right? You kind of want your little ones running around like those baby tigers. You might find lemmings. Who's ever heard of lemmings before? Oh, yes, y'all are in for a treat today. Caribou, polar bears, and Arctic hares are in and we'll see some of those. We'll see the Arctic fox, we'll see the polar bear, and some other animals that are in the Arctic when we go to the zoo in a couple weeks. Seals, walrus, and we learned a crazy fact, right? We've typically listed a polar bear as a carnivore. But we learned that when they get hungry enough, they'll eat berries. They are omnivores, which is really weird. Other predators of the tundra, Arctic foxes and wolves. Some birds migrate in and out of there, not a lot. Because the animals of the tundra are generally migratory, this biome's population is constantly changing. Migratory means that they move. When it's negative 50, that's a little too much. I'm going to move a little further down, maybe into the taiga where it's a little warmer. Predators hunt herbivores like caribou and lemmings and hares. Mosquitoes, flies, moths, grasshoppers, Arctic bumblebees. Cannot wait to talk about those. And other insects are at the bottom of the food chain, and birds feed on those. Probably the coolest, and sorry about that, Grant, I still love the polar bears, but probably one of the coolest animals I've ever seen is the Arctic bumblebee. Bumblebees, like any other insect, is cold-blooded. Do you know what it means to be cold-blooded? If you're cold-blooded, you take on the temperatures of your surroundings. Would that be a smart thing to do if you lived in the tundra? Probably not, but let's listen to how this thing... They have some special adaptations that allow them to overcome cool temperatures. On sunny days, they're buzzing around doing their thing. And if it weren't for Arctic bumblebees, again, they are a keystone creature, in my opinion. They take advantage of the solar reflective qualities of flowers. So they get into these flowers that kind of magnifies the sun's heat, and it raises their body temperature faster, which is crazy to think about, right? I don't know how the bees know that. They have another key mechanism to heat up their body. Large muscles, like the muscles inside of a bumblebee are larger than the other bees, and it helps keep their body temperature high enough so that they can shiver, which is kind of crazy, but fly around and keep all the plants pollinated, which is very, very important. They have thicker fur. They are fuzzier than most bumblebees, and bumblebees already are big and puffy. These are even more puffy and cute. And it also traps and conserves some of their heat. So I love the Arctic bumblebee. I think it's pretty awesome. And I'll come back to that. And it looks like we can pause the video.